Good morning, everyone. Welcome back here at ECCMID TV, brought live to you from the Bella Center here in Copenhagen, Denmark. My name is Judith Cohen. I'll be your TV host, and I'm very happy to announce that I have two new guests here in our studio with me. They are the speakers of one of the highly popular year-in sessions, the Year in Public Health. On my far left, I have Tyra Krause from Copenhagen. This is a home match for you. And we're accompanied also by Joël Mossong from Luxembourg. Welcome to both of you. You will both be speaking at the year-in session concerning or regarding public health. You two know each other already, Tyra?
Yes, we're in the program committee together.
You're in the program committee together. So, yeah, did you manage did you choose to do the year-in session together?
Yes, we have been in touch and discussed.
Yes, we've been in touch, definitely.
Yes.
But so the idea was to try not to talk about the same things. So we've tried and see
As
how we
earlier years. Or
it's the first time that it's actually
the first time public health, right?
Public health.
Yeah.
So it's new. It's new to us also.
Yeah.
So what we try to do is not to cover exactly the same topics.
I can imagine that public health has been a lot has been happening in the past year. How are you going to get it all together in? Well, I think you both have half an hour to give an overview of the past year.
Well, we have decided to cover different topics, and I'm going to talk about COVID-19 because, of course, that has been one of the major themes for public health this year, and to talk about some of the most important or some of the important data that we have used in order to do make the best guidance for our decision makers.
Yeah.
And then I'm also going to talk a bit about what we have seen after COVID-19, the changing infection patterns afterwards. And finally, I'm going to talk about a very strange outbreak we've had in Denmark this year, where people who have been given an antibiotic, it was actually contaminated with some multi-resistant bacteria, and that's
the antibiotic itself was contaminated.
It was contaminated.
Wow.
So that was quite. I've not ever experienced in my.
And was that in
many
production in Denmark only, or was it also?
No, it was not produced in Denmark, but it was on the market in Denmark and also in Iceland.
Okay. So Iceland had the same problem.
So it was withdrawn from the market, but it has raised a lot of public health questions because this resistant bacteria, carbapenemase producing organism, is something we don't want to. We want to reduce the transmission in the society, and how do we deal with an outbreak like this, where you're not necessarily becoming ill from being a carrier, but on the other hand, we don't want to get the infections into our hospitals.
Yeah, and how big was the outbreak?
I think now we have about 28 cases, but we know it's likely only the tip of the iceberg that we detect. So likely more cases. And what is interesting about this outbreak is that these resistant genes that you have in the outbreak bacteria can be transferred to other bacteria. So right now, the cases we see actually carry other bacteria, but they have the same resistant genes as the ones we saw in the original outbreak strain.
Wow. Yeah, that's very concerning. Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
How did you actually find out about the outbreak? How was the signal detected?
Yeah, we found out in the end of January that we had more cases than expected, 9 cases with this carbapenemase producing bacteria, and it had a unique resistance pattern that we haven't seen before. And usually, if we see outbreaks with these bacteria, they're nosocomial outbreaks, or it's because people have been traveling, and we couldn't find any link between the cases. And then we started to do interviews, and one of our university hospitals, they found out that the 3 patients that they knew of had all taken the same antibiotic. Okay. And then we started to interview the other cases, and we found that they have all taken the same antibiotic before they were detected with this bacteria.
But still, doesn't that mean that the surveillance in Denmark is really good? I mean, just 9 cases. Well, in my
Yes, exactly. Because
opinion,
I think, and that
there's
was also
already
our
an
concern, that maybe this was bigger, this outbreak. But in many countries, other countries, maybe they would not be able to detect an outbreak like this. But the medicines authorities, they found out that it had only been produced, or this production line where we assume that the capsules got infected, has only been used for producing this antibiotic that has only been used in Denmark and in Iceland.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of lessons to be learned from a situation like this. That's really interesting. Joël, what will you be focusing on during the year-in session?
So, as we already said, we split the topics a little bit. So I'm going to be talking a bit about other outbreaks, also apart from COVID. And the first one was about Salmonella in chocolate eggs. That was happened last year. I think again it has some similarities with the with this, because it is related to a product that was sold widely throughout Europe. I've been involved also in the outbreak investigation in my home country, so we have some a unique viewpoint on this. The second outbreak, or let's say increase of cases, is the one about acute severe hepatitis in children.
Yes.
That also occurred last year.
Yeah.
And there's been some, very recently, a few studies coming out in Nature showing that it's actually quite an interesting, let's say, outbreak, because you see, on the one hand, you see initially researchers thought that it had something to do with adenovirus. Mm-hmm. That was the first signal found. And then when they then looked a little bit more at the clinical cases, they didn't really detect the adenovirus in the liver samples. After they did some metagenomics on the liver samples, and then they found out that it's actually this adeno-associated virus 2, which is probably playing a major role, because they found this virus in quite high concentration in the liver samples. That's one part of the story, and the second part of the story is that there's also a genetic component. So not all children who have this infection are susceptible to this, but you have to have a certain HLA-2 class allele to be more susceptible for this. So I think it's quite a really nice story coming out, and there's 3 teams.
And is a large proportion of the children susceptible to getting this hepatitis?
From the data that come out, about 1 in 6 children have this particular allele. So
that's quite a public health hazard.
In a way, it can be, I think, but it's also the third component again is a little bit that so the adenovirus itself cannot cause this severe cases, but it's actually it needs a helper virus usually, and that has been the adenovirus. But I think there's also suggestion that there's other viruses like herpes viruses. When they cause this infection, then the adenovirus takes off in the liver and can cause these severe cases. So it's a kind of a complicated story that you need a mix of the right thing. And I think it occurred also related to COVID, because there was a lot of these viruses were not able to
flourish,
transmit, because there are so many contact precautions, people were not traveling. And it's only last year when actually Omicron came, where societies had to open up to some extent again, because the threat had gone also, that new virus can take hold, and there's some data also that I will present that shows that these adeno-associated viruses, the concentration changed also since the pandemic, and it's only so last year that you really can notice this in sewage water. Before it wasn't there.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing to see how much happens in a year time, because I can remember last year's ECCMID, there were breaking sessions on this hepatitis in children. So that was they were just coming out in the surveillance that this was likely to be a problem. And, well, we can hear you almost describing the full pathophysiology of the event. So that's interesting.
So what is actually the explanation for that you saw this signal in some countries and not in other countries?
Again, I think it's like from what you said, you have very good surveillance in some countries and you don't in others. Yeah. I think you needed to have quite big countries to be able to detect this thing, because it is, after all, quite a rare event. And so because the first units that saw the signal were in specialized pediatric liver units, for example, in the UK, and so you have to have quite a critical mass of this. But I think it's a problem because routinely you don't do the surveillance of this because it is such a rare phenomenon that you don't normally see. So I think this is one of the reasons why it was seen in some countries and not in others. But we see this also for the Salmonella outbreak. Some countries had a lot of cases and other countries didn't, just because they don't do sequencing. You have to do the sequencing to be able to link the isolates to the to find this unique type of isolates. And a lot of countries don't. Some countries do, like Denmark does, like UK do. Often you find UK is, I think, are still, we're quite happy that UK is doing quite a lot of surveillance because they are finding a lot of the signals.
Yeah.
Bringing me to my last topic, which is the monkeypox or mpox.
I was just wondering about that one.
So
we can't have missed it the past year. No.
Yeah. So of course, what we saw there is a big increase, big outbreak, but kind of not too severe for most cases in MSM. In Europe, at least, a bit of a different story in South America. And of course, the big question here now is what's going to happen this year? Are we going to expect another outbreak? Or has because there has been a rollout of vaccination, there's some conflicting data. Some people say the vaccine's going to work because you have to remember this vaccine was not designed against monkeypox or against mpox, but designed against smallpox. So we're not really quite sure how good it will be over.
Did they stop the vaccination like in some countries during?
I don't think they stopped now. They're still continuing. I think the vaccine is still available, but it's essentially that the target population, which is let's say the MSM community with a lot of sexual partners or who have had STI infections in the past, most of those who wanted to be vaccinated have been vaccinated in some countries. So it's like the vaccine has been given to those communities that wanted them, essentially.
Yeah, and what is the duration of the efficacy of these vaccines? Do they need
that's
boosters?
what nobody knows.
No one knows.
That one knows. And actually, we found also another concerning. I've seen there's been reports recently of reinfections. So people who got it was still called monkeypox at the time, in June, July, and then another one a bit later on where they got re-exposed. So I think the jury is still out about the duration of immunity, both from natural infection and from vaccination. It's going to be some exciting times ahead.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that a session like this is also really, it creates an overview of what is happening, but also where we stand right now. And it sort of clarifies what are still the unmet needs and where we need to progress with the research. So I think it's going to be very interesting. I would like to thank you both so much for your time to come here and give our viewers a little tip of the veil on what's going to come tomorrow. If you are planning to go to the year-in session with Tyra Krause and Joël Mossong, please do so, because I think there's a lot of very interesting content that has occurred in the past year. It will be tomorrow from 1:30 to 2:30 in Hall K. So make sure you join them for this year in public health session. And make sure to join us again in about, less than an hour already. At 11 sharp, we'll be back and we will be discussing the very interesting topic of paleomicrobiology. And we will be inviting Professor Johannes Krause, who will enlighten us more on this subject. So hope to see you then at 11.